October 31st, 1941. The North Atlantic, 600 miles west of Ireland. A German submarine with a grinning red devil painted on its conning tower rises from the depths, positioning itself for an attack on an Allied convoy. The United States is not yet officially at war with Germany, but that distinction means nothing to the men aboard USS ReubenJames, and it means nothing to the commander of U-552, Captain Lieutenant Erich Topp. Topp has been stalking convoy HX-156 for hours, watching the escorts, calculating his approach. The American destroyer is protecting British merchant ships carrying supplies across the Atlantic, supplies that Germany desperately wants to stop. Some accounts suggest the destroyer crossed into the path of torpedoes fired at a convoy merchantman, though the distinction mattered little to the men who died. 2 torpedoes find ReubenJames in the early morning darkness. The explosion is catastrophic. The forward magazine detonates, breaking the ship in 2. She sinks in minutes. 115 American sailors die. ReubenJames becomes the first U.S. Navy warship sunk by hostile action in the Atlantic, 5 weeks before Pearl Harbor. 2 weeks earlier, USS Kearney had been torpedoed with 11 dead. The undeclared war at sea was already claiming American lives. The man who just killed them is 27 years old, already one of Germany's most successful submarine commanders, and will survive the war to become something that seems impossible. A respected figure in the post-war world, a naval architect, and eventually a rear admiral in a navy allied with the very nations he once fought against. This is the story of Erich Topp, the Red Devil of the Atlantic, 3rd highest scoring U-boat ace of World War II, who sank over 35 ships, totaling nearly 200,000 tons, wore the KnightsCross with oak leaves and swords, served a genocidal regime, and somehow emerged to build a second career, helping to defend the West against Soviet aggression. It's a story that forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. Can a man serve evil and still be considered professional? Can skill be admired when it's used to kill? Can someone who fought for Hitler be trusted to defend democracy? Erich Topp's life provides no easy answers, only the complicated truth that war creates heroes and villains who are often the same people, that enemies can become allies, and that history rarely delivers the simple moral judgments we might prefer. From the wolf packs of the Battle of the Atlantic to the design offices of the Cold War Bundesmarine, from the KnightsCross ceremonies of Nazi Germany to NATO planning rooms, this is the remarkable journey of a man who witnessed the 20th century's greatest conflicts from positions of extraordinary influence. A man who proved that survival sometimes means transformation, that the past doesn't always determine the future, and that the most dangerous enemies can become the most valuable allies. The Red Devil of the Atlantic, a killer in the service of tyranny who became a builder in the service of freedom. And a reminder that history is never as simple as we want it to be. Erich Topp was born on July 2nd, 1914 in Hannover, Germany, just weeks before the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand would plunge Europe into the First World War. He would grow up in a Germany shaped by that war's devastating aftermath, economic chaos, political instability, and the burning resentment of the Versailles Treaty. The Germany of Topp's youth was a nation searching for identity and purpose. The Weimar Republic struggled to establish democratic traditions in a country with little experience of them. Hyperinflation wiped out savings. Unemployment soared, and in this environment of desperation, extremist movements found fertile ground. Topp joined the Kriegsmarine, the small navy permitted to Germany under Versailles, in 1934, at the age of 20. He was drawn to naval service by family tradition and personal ambition, seeking a career that offered adventure, discipline, and the possibility of serving his country. The following year, everything changed. Adolf Hitler's Nazi regime openly repudiated the Versailles Treaty and began rebuilding Germany's military. The Reichsmarine became the Kriegsmarine, and ambitious young officers like Topp suddenly found themselves in a rapidly expanding service with opportunities for advancement that would have been impossible just years before. Topp initially served on surface vessels, learning the fundamentals of seamanship and naval warfare. But in 1937, he made a decision that would define his career. He volunteered for the U-boat arm. The German submarine service was rebuilding from nothing. The Versailles Treaty had forbidden Germany from operating submarines, so the Kriegsmarine had to create an entire force from scratch, recruiting officers, training crews, developing tactics, and building boats. Topp excelled in this environment. He demonstrated the combination of technical skill, tactical instinct, and leadership ability that the submarine service demanded. By the time war broke out in September 1939, he was a trained U-boat officer ready for combat. His first combat assignment came aboard U-46 as a watch officer, where he learned the realities of submarine warfare under experienced commanders. He participated in patrols in the North Sea and Atlantic, observing the tactics that would later make him famous. In December 1940, Topp received his first command, U-57, a small Type 2C coastal submarine. It was not an impressive vessel, just 42 meters long, with limited range and only 3 torpedo tubes. But it was his, and Topp was determined to prove himself. The early months of 1941 saw Topp conducting patrols in the waters around Britain, attacking coastal convoys and learning the art of command. He achieved several sinkings during this period, demonstrating the aggressive instincts that would characterize his career. But U-57 was too small for the major Atlantic operations that were becoming the focus of Germany's submarine campaign. In the spring of 1941, Topp was given command of a larger, more capable boat, U-552, a Type 6EC that would become one of the most famous submarines of the war. It was aboard U-552 that Topp would earn his reputation as the Red Devil of the Atlantic. U-552 was a thoroughbred, a Type 6C submarine that represented the backbone of Germany's Atlantic campaign. 67 meters long, armed with 5 torpedo tubes and an 88mm deck gun, she could dive to over 200 meters and cruise for nearly 9,000 miles. In the right hands, she was lethal. Topp's hands were very much the right ones. Shortly after taking command, Topp adopted a distinctive emblem for his boat, a grinning red devil figure painted on the conning tower. The image would become famous among both German submariners and Allied convoy escorts, a symbol of one of the most aggressive and successful U-boat commanders in the Atlantic. The Red Devil wasn't just decoration, it was a statement of intent. Topp approached submarine warfare with an audacity that set him apart even among the elite commanders of the U-boat arm. First 552's first war patrol under Topp began in April 1941, and the results were immediate. Operating in the waters south of Iceland, Topp found and attacked convoy SC-26, sinking 2 ships in his first engagement as commander of the new boat. This was the beginning of what would become known as the happy time for German submariners, a period when Allied anti-submarine defenses were overwhelmed and U-boats achieved devastating success against Atlantic convoys. Over the following months, Topp conducted patrol after patrol, each one adding to his growing tally of victims. His tactics were characterized by boldness. He attacked on the surface at night when visibility favored the submarine, pressed into the heart of convoys rather than picking off stragglers, and demonstrated a remarkable ability to evade the escorts that hunted him. In June 1941, U-552 encountered convoy HX-133 and attacked with devastating effect, sinking multiple ships over several nights of running battle. The escorts depth-charged Topp repeatedly, but he evaded destruction and continued his attacks until his torpedoes were exhausted. Later that summer, operating in the waters around the Azores, Topp attacked convoy OG-71, adding more ships to his growing record. Each successful patrol brought recognition, promotions, decorations, and the growing fame that made U-552 and her Red Devil emblem known throughout the U-boat arm. But it was the attack that sank USS ReubenJames in October 1941 that would make Topp's name known far beyond submarine circles. The American destroyer was escorting convoy HX-156, part of the unofficial naval war that had developed between the United States and Germany even before Pearl Harbor. American warships were protecting British convoys, and German submarines were attacking those convoys, a confrontation that made conflict increasingly inevitable. Topp's torpedoes found ReubenJames in the early morning darkness of October 31st. The explosion was catastrophic. The forward magazine detonated, breaking the ship in two. She sank in minutes, taking 115 American sailors with her. The sinking made headlines around the world. In America, it intensified the debate over intervention that would be settled definitively at Pearl Harbor 5 weeks later. In Germany, Topp was hailed as a hero who had struck a blow against the increasingly hostile Americans. By the end of 1941, Topp had been awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross, Germany's highest military decoration for valor. He was recognized as one of the elite commanders of the U-boat arm, mentioned in the same breath as legends like Otto Kretschmer and Günther Prien. But 1942 would bring even greater success, and the additions to his Knight's Cross that would mark him as one of the war's supreme submarine commanders. In the first months of 1942, as America entered the war and the U-boats launched Operation Drumbeat against the American East Coast, Topp achieved some of his greatest successes. Operating in waters where American defenses were virtually non-existent, he sank ship after ship, tankers, freighters, any target of opportunity. The tonnage accumulated rapidly. Topp received the oak leaves to his Knight's Cross in April 1942, then the swords in August, decorations held by only a handful of officers in the entire German military. By mid-1942, Erich Topp had sunk over 30 ships, totaling nearly 200,000 tons. He was the third highest-scoring U-boat commander of the war, behind only Otto Kretschmer and Wolfgang Luth. The Red Devil had earned his reputation in blood. A Battle of the Atlantic began to turn against Germany in 1943. Allied countermeasures, improved radar, long-range aircraft, better convoy tactics, and the breaking of German codes transformed submarine warfare from a one-sided slaughter into a brutal war of attrition that Germany was losing. U-boats that had once hunted with near impunity now faced detection from aircraft that could spot them day or night, from surface escorts equipped with radar that could track them through darkness and fog. The hunters were becoming the hunted. Topp experienced this shift firsthand. His later patrols with U-552 became increasingly dangerous, with longer periods of pursuit by escorts and fewer opportunities for successful attacks. The easy pickings of 1941 and early 42 were gone, replaced by a grinding campaign of survival. In the spring of 1943, Germany suffered what historians call Black May, a month when 43 U-boats were lost, a casualty rate so devastating that Admiral Dönitz temporarily withdrew his submarines from the North Atlantic. The happy time was definitively over. For Topp, the changing conditions brought a change in assignment. In September 1942, after completing his patrols with U-552, he was transferred to shore duty, assigned to help train the next generation of U-boat commanders, and later to work on the development of new submarine technologies. This was not demotion. Senior commanders like Topp were too valuable to risk in the increasingly deadly Atlantic. Their experience was needed to train replacements for the crews being lost at ever-increasing rates. Topp served in various training and staff positions over the following 2 years. He helped establish procedures for the new Type 21 submarines, revolutionary boats that could have transformed the war if they had entered service earlier. He continued to advance in rank, reaching Korvettenkapitän in 1942 and Fregattenkapitän in 1944. During this period, Topp had several brushes with the Nazi regime that revealed the tensions beneath the surface of his service. Like many professional naval officers, Topp's primary loyalty was to the Navy and to Germany rather than to the Nazi Party. He was not an ideological zealot, and his occasional friction with party officials reflected the broader tension between military professionalism and political fanaticism that existed throughout the German armed forces. After the failed assassination attempt against Hitler in July 1944, the military came under increased suspicion from the Nazi leadership. Officers who showed insufficient enthusiasm for the regime faced scrutiny. Topp navigated this dangerous period by maintaining his focus on technical matters and avoiding political entanglements. In the last months of the war, Topp received one final command: U-2513, one of the revolutionary Type 21 submarines that Germany had hoped would turn the tide. These boats were dramatically superior to the Type 7s that had fought the Atlantic campaign. Faster underwater, capable of extended submerged operations, equipped with advanced sonar and fire control systems. But the Type 21s arrived too late. Production had been delayed by Allied bombing, and training crews took time that Germany no longer had. U-2513 never conducted a combat patrol under Topp's command. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, Topp was among the surviving U-boat commanders who followed orders to surface their boats, hoist black flags, and proceed to Allied ports. He had survived a war that killed roughly 30,000 German submariners, a casualty rate of approximately 75%, the highest of any branch of any service in the entire war. Of the 40,000 men who served on German U-boats, only 1 in 4 came home. Erich Topp was one of the survivors, but his survival raised questions that would follow him for the rest of his life. The immediate aftermath of Germany's surrender brought captivity and uncertainty. Topp spent time in Allied prisoner of war camps, his future unclear. He had served a criminal regime, worn its decorations, killed for its cause. What place could there be for him in the post-war world? The Germany that emerged from World War II was a nation in ruins, physically destroyed, morally compromised, occupied by foreign powers, and divided between East and West. For former military officers, the question of what to do with their lives was complicated by their association with the Nazi regime. Some former officers were prosecuted for war crimes. Others retreated into private life, their military careers a closed chapter. But as the Cold War intensified and West Germany became a front line in the struggle against Soviet expansion, attitudes began to shift. The Western Allies, particularly the United States, recognized that a rearmed West Germany would be essential to European defense. And building a new German military would require experienced officers who understood modern warfare. Former Wehrmacht and Kriegsmarine personnel, once viewed with suspicion, became valuable assets. In a remarkable symbol of the post-war reversal, President Harry Truman himself descended aboard U-2513 in 1946, an American commander-in-chief touring the revolutionary submarine of his former enemy. The boat that Topp had commanded was now being studied by American naval engineers, her advanced design influencing the development of post-war submarines. U-552, the Red Devil's famous boat, met a different fate. She was among the vessels scuttled in Operation Deadliest, the mass disposal of surrendered U-boats in the Atlantic. Her Red Devil emblem sank beneath the waters she had once terrorized. Before returning to military service, however, Topp took a different path. He studied naval architecture, earning his degree and working in shipbuilding during the late 1940s and early 50s. This was not merely a career choice. It represented a genuine interest in the technical aspects of naval warfare that had characterized his service. Topp had always been fascinated by submarine design, and his experience with the Type 21 boats had shown him the potential for revolutionary technologies that he now wanted to help develop. In 1958, when West Germany established the Bundesmarine as part of its contribution to NATO, Topp was among the former officers recruited to help build the new service. His expertise in submarines, both operational and technical, made him valuable despite the complexities of his wartime record. He contributed to the development of West Germany's new submarine classes, including the Type 201 and 205 boats that would form the backbone of the Bundesmarine's underwater fleet. His experience from both combat operations and post-war engineering studies made him uniquely qualified for this work. The decision to serve in the Bundesmarine was not without controversy. Topp had been a hero of the Nazi regime, decorated by Hitler himself. His Red Devil had sent thousands of Allied sailors to their deaths. How could such a man be trusted with responsibilities in a democratic navy allied with his former enemies? Topp addressed these questions with characteristic directness throughout his post-war career. He maintained that he had been a professional naval officer, not a political figure, that he had followed legal orders in conducting legitimate military operations, not participated in war crimes. This distinction was important but not simple. The U-boat campaign was legal under the laws of naval warfare as then understood. Topp had not participated in atrocities against survivors or prisoners. His conduct had been within the bounds of military professionalism. But he had also served a regime that committed genocide, and his successes had helped sustain that regime's war effort. The moral calculus was complicated, and different observers reached different conclusions about what responsibility men like Topp bore for the system they served. Within the Bundesmarine and NATO, Topp rose steadily. He held various command and staff positions, contributing his expertise to the development of West Germany's submarine force and to NATO's overall naval strategy. By the 1960s, he had reached the rank of Rear Admiral, a flag officer in a navy allied with the nations he had once fought against. He worked alongside American, British, and other NATO officers, planning defenses against the Soviet threat. The Americans, who had lost 115 men on USS ReubenJames, now counted Erich Topp as an ally. The British, whose convoys he had devastated, now sat with him in planning sessions. The transformation was remarkable, and to some, deeply troubling. Topp himself seemed to accept the contradictions of his position with pragmatic equanimity. The war was over. Germany had been transformed. The threat now came from the East, not the West. Whatever his past, his future lay in helping to defend the democratic order that had emerged from the war's destruction. Whether this represented genuine moral growth, practical adaptation, or simple survival instinct is impossible to know. Perhaps it was all three. History rarely provides the clean narratives that make such judgments easy. Erich Topp retired from the Bundesmarine in 1969, having served his second navy for over a decade. But retirement did not mean withdrawal from public life. He remained active in veterans organizations, naval affairs, and the ongoing debates about how Germany should remember its past. In his later years, Topp wrote about his experiences and gave interviews about the Battle of the Atlantic. He was a sought-after source for historians studying the U-boat campaign, offering first-hand perspectives on tactics, leadership, and the experience of submarine warfare. His accounts were generally professional and technical, focused on operational matters rather than ideological questions. He described the war from a submariner's perspective: the hunts, the attacks, the evasions, the losses. He did not apologize for his service, but neither did he glorify the Nazi regime. This approach satisfied some observers, but troubled others. Critics argue that focusing on professional competence while avoiding moral questions about the cause served was itself a form of evasion, that men like Topp had an obligation to grapple more directly with the implications of their service. The debates about how to remember German military personnel from World War II continued throughout Topp's life and beyond. Were they simply soldiers following orders, or were they complicit in Nazi crimes? Could their professional achievements be recognized while acknowledging the evil of the system they served? These questions applied with particular force to successful figures like Topp, whose decorations and accomplishments had made them heroes of the Nazi war effort. The Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords was not just a recognition of skill, it was a propaganda tool of a genocidal regime. Topp's response to these debates evolved over time. In his later years, he acknowledged more directly the moral complexities of his service, though he maintained his fundamental position that he had been a military professional rather than a political actor. The sinking of USS ReubenJames remained a particular point of discussion. Topp's torpedoes had killed 115 Americans before their country was even officially at war with Germany. To American audiences, this was not abstract history, it was the death of their countrymen. Topp's position was that ReubenJames had been a legitimate military target engaged in hostile acts against Germany by escorting enemy convoys. The legal argument had merit under the laws of naval warfare. But legal legitimacy and moral acceptability are not always the same thing. When Topp visited the United States in his post-war career, he occasionally encountered family members of ReubenJames sailors. These encounters were reportedly cordial but fraught, the strange meetings of former enemies in a world transformed by the Cold War. Erich Topp died on December 26, 2005, in Remagen, Germany. He was 91 years old, having outlived nearly all of his fellow U-boat aces and most of his former enemies. His death prompted obituaries that struggled with the same contradictions that had defined his life. How to summarize a career that included service to Nazism and service to NATO? How to assess a man who was both a decorated killer and a respected professional? The answers varied with the perspectives of those offering them. To some, Topp was a military professional who had done his duty under difficult circumstances and then contributed constructively to the post-war world. To others, he was a beneficiary of selective amnesia who never adequately confronted the moral implications of his wartime service. Historians have continued to debate these questions. The consensus, such as it exists, acknowledges both Topp's extraordinary competence as a submarine commander and the problematic nature of the cause he served with such effectiveness. He was undeniably one of the greatest submarine tacticians of the 20th century. His record places him among an elite handful of commanders whose skill in underwater warfare has rarely been matched. As a pure military assessment, this is simply fact. But military skill does not exist in a moral vacuum. Topp's torpedoes sank ships carrying food, fuel, and weapons to a Britain fighting for survival against Nazi aggression. His successes prolonged a war that Germany was fighting for monstrous ends. His Knight's Cross came from the hands of a regime that murdered millions. The question of how to remember men like Erich Topp remains unresolved, and perhaps unresolvable. History resists the simple categories of heroes and villains. The Red Devil of the Atlantic was both a consummate professional and a servant of evil, a killer of Allied sailors and an ally of the West, a decorated Nazi officer and a Bundesmarine admiral. He was, in other words, human, shaped by his times, driven by ambitions and loyalties that shifted with circumstances, capable of both remarkable achievement and moral compromise. And in that complexity, Erich Topp's story offers not lessons but questions about duty and morality, about enemies and allies, about how we judge those who served causes we condemn while excelling at tasks we admire. October 31st, 1941. A submarine with a red devil on its conning tower sends torpedoes into the night. 115 American sailors die. The commander who killed them will live for another 64 years, wear two nations' uniforms, and die peacefully in a reunified Germany. Erich Topp's life spans the 20th century's great convulsions: World War, Cold War, reunification. He fought on the losing side of history's greatest conflict, yet emerged to serve on the winning side of the struggle that followed. He killed for a criminal regime and built ships for a democratic one. There are no easy ways to summarize such a life. Topp was not a simple villain, though he served a villainous cause. He was not a simple hero, though he displayed undeniable courage and skill. He was a man of his time, shaped by forces larger than himself, making choices that we can judge, but perhaps never fully understand. The Red Devil of the Atlantic sank over 35 ships and nearly 200,000 tons of Allied shipping. He wore the Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords, among the highest decorations of a genocidal regime. He helped build the Bundesmarine and served NATO as an admiral. U-552, the boat that made him famous, survived the war and was surrendered to the Allies. She was scuttled with dozens of other U-boats in Operation Deadliest, her red devil emblem sinking beneath the Atlantic waters she had once terrorized. U-2513, his final command, had a different fate. Surrendered to the United States, she was studied intensively by American naval engineers, her revolutionary design influencing the development of post-war submarines. President Truman himself toured her decks in 1946, a commander-in-chief inspecting the weapon of his former enemy. Then she too was sunk, used as a target in weapons tests off Key West in 1951. Erich Topp survived both his submarines and his war. He lived to see Germany rebuilt, reunified, and integrated into the Western alliance he had once fought against. He died as a respected figure in naval circles, mourned by colleagues who had served both with and against him. His story is the story of the 20th century's moral complexity, of nations that transform from enemies to allies, of men who serve first one flag and then another, of history's refusal to provide the clean endings and clear judgments we might prefer. The Red Devil of the Atlantic, third highest scoring U-boat ace of World War II, Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords, Bundesmarine Rear Admiral, killer of Allied sailors, defender of the West, Erich Topp, a man who proved that war's heroes and villains are often the same people, and that history's judgment is never as simple as we want it to be.